Story number 1, Boiler Room. I arrived at the closed dormitory building on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. The structure sat at the northern edge of the campus, a 4-story brick building constructed in 1968. My assignment was straightforward: conduct a standard pre-renovation environmental assessment for the state university system. The building had been vacant for 18 months, following a mold remediation that never fully resolved complaints from the last occupants. The university wanted clearance before investing in structural work and system upgrades. I checked in with facilities management at 8:30 in the morning. The building supervisor, a man named Reeves, handed me a set of keys and a clipboard with the floor plan mark. He did not accompany me inside. He said the building was secure and that I should log my entry and exit times in the book by the main entrance. I did this. The time was 8:45. The first floor was unremarkable: linoleum flooring, institutional paint, empty bulletin boards. I documented the HVAC system locations, checked for visible mold or water damage, and moved upward. The second floor was identical in layout. By 10:15, I had completed my initial walkthrough of floors 1 and 2 and begun my assessment of the third floor east wing. It was during this walkthrough that I first noticed the temperature inconsistencies. Room 301 measured 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Room 302 measured 58 degrees. Room 303 measured 55 degrees. The hallway itself held steady at 68 degrees. I checked the HVAC returns and found no blockage, no damage, no malfunction that would explain the gradient. I documented this in my field notebook and photographed the thermometer readings against the wall. I closed each door as I finished with each room. I was methodical about this. I remember closing the doors. I returned the following morning to collect air samples. The building was still secure. The entry log showed only my signature from the previous day. I climbed to the third floor east wing. All interior doors on the third floor were standing open. I checked my field notebook. I had documented closing each one. I had noted the times. I had written them down in sequence. The doors were now open. Not ajar. Open. Some fully against the walls. Some at angles that suggested they had been opened with force. I did not close them again. I collected my air samples and left the building. I did not log the open doors in my report. I contacted my site supervisor, Dr. Patricia Vance, by telephone at 2 o'clock that afternoon. I told her what I had found. I described the temperature gradient and the open doors. I asked if there had been any maintenance access to the building overnight. She was silent for approximately 10 seconds. Then she instructed me to complete the assessment without accessing the fourth floor. She said the fourth floor had been administratively sealed since 2020, due to structural concerns. She said it was not part of my assignment. I acknowledged this instruction. She told me to finish my work and submit my report within 2 days. I returned to the building on Thursday morning. I was alone. I brought my equipment and my documentation materials. I worked through the morning on the second and third floors, collecting samples, taking measurements, photographing conditions. At approximately 11:30, I heard footsteps moving through the floor above me. The footsteps were distinct and regular. They moved from one end of the corridor to the other, then back. The pattern repeated 3 times. Then they stopped. The fourth floor was sealed. I had not accessed it. No one else had logged entry into the building. The footsteps had come from above. I sat in the third floor hallway for 4 minutes. Then I moved to the emergency stairwell and climbed to the fourth floor. The door at the top of the stairwell was not locked. It opened inward. The fourth floor was dark. I used my flashlight. The corridor extended in both directions from the stairwell, lined with dormitory rooms. The doors were all closed. The walls were covered in dust. And on the walls, at approximately 5 feet 2 inches in height, were handprints. They were pressed into the dust in a single line, running the length of the corridor. I counted them as I walked. 73 handprints, all the same size, all the same depth, all facing the same direction, all leading toward a locked custodial closet at the far end of the east wing. I used my key ring to attempt the lock. The door opened. Inside was a standard maintenance closet. Shelving units held cleaning supplies, mop buckets, a floor buffer, replacement light bulbs. On a small wooden desk was a maintenance log bound in blue cloth. I opened it. The entries were dated and signed. They covered a period from 1984 to March 2023. The entries were routine: filter changes, light replacements, floor waxing, pest control inspections. The handwriting changed several times over the decades, indicating different custodians. The final entry was dated March 19th, 2023. It was written in blue ballpoint pen in a careful, steady hand. It read, "Heard them counting again." Below that entry, the remaining pages were blank. I photographed the log. I closed the closet. I descended the emergency stairwell. I left the building at 12:07. I logged my exit time. I filed my environmental report as satisfactory for renovation. I noted the temperature inconsistencies in the third floor east wing, but attributed them to minor ductwork imbalance, a common condition in aging buildings. I recommended standard HV balancing during the renovation phase. I made no mention of the fourth floor. I made no mention of the doors. I made no mention of the footsteps or the handprints or the maintenance log. I submitted a separate incident memo to Dr. Vance. I described what I had documented on the fourth floor. I did not speculate on the cause. I did not attempt to explain the handprints or the log entry. I simply reported what I had observed and photographed. I submitted the memo on Friday morning. On Sunday evening, Dr. Vance called me. She said my incident memo had been reclassified. She said it was no longer part of my assignment file. She said my contract with the university system would not be renewed beyond the current project. She said this was not a reflection on my work. She said the building would be demolished within the fiscal year. She said I should not discuss my assessment with anyone. She said if I had questions, I should contact the university's legal department. I did not contact the legal department. The building was demolished 4 months later under an expedited infrastructure renewal grant. The demolition was completed in 3 weeks. I received notice of my contract termination in a standard form letter dated 1 week after the demolition concluded. No reason was provided. No severance was offered. My file was closed. The incident memo was filed under restricted access and has not been reviewed since. Story number 2, Canyon Watch. I arrived at the unmanned sensor station at 14:30 hours on a Tuesday in late September. The drive from the field office had taken 4 hours through terrain that grew progressively more remote the farther I traveled from the highway. The station itself was positioned on a flat plateau overlooking a canyon system, accessible by a narrow service road that had been graded but not paved. I had been here 4 times before, always alone, always during daylight, always without complication. The external housing was intact. No signs of tampering, no animal damage, no weather-related deterioration beyond the expected dust accumulation. I performed the visual inspection first, as protocol required, then unlocked the access panel and began the standard quarterly maintenance sequence. Battery replacement, sensor calibration, firmware verification, data download. It was during the data download that I noticed the anomaly. The primary data logger had recorded continuous motion alerts for the preceding 72 hours. This was unusual. The station occupied a geologically stable area with minimal wildlife activity. The nearest human settlement was 18 miles away. The motion signatures in the logs were numerous and distributed across multiple sensor arrays. But when I referenced them against our reference database, they did not match any known classification. Not wildlife, not wind-driven debris, not thermal expansion of the housing itself. I documented the finding in my field tablet and proceeded with the battery replacement. The backup power system required approximately 45 minutes to swap out. While I worked, I reviewed the motion data more carefully. The timestamps were correct. The sensor readings were within normal operational parameters, but the patterns themselves were not consistent with anything in my training or experience. That was when I noticed the seismic data. The ground-facing sensor, positioned to detect subsurface vibrations, had registered rhythmic activity at 6-hour intervals over the same 72-hour window. The vibrations were consistent in amplitude and duration. They originated from approximately 40 meters below the surface. They were not aftershocks. They were not tectonic noise. They were rhythmic in a way that suggested intention, though I understood that assessment was not my role to make. I contacted my supervisor via satellite phone at 16:15 hours. I reported the motion alerts and the subsurface vibrations. I provided the timestamp data and the classification problem. There was a pause on the line that lasted longer than usual. My supervisor instructed me to complete the maintenance and flag the data for remote analysis. I was not to investigate further. I was not to remain on site longer than necessary. I was to file my equipment report upon return to the field office and note only the routine maintenance items. I acknowledged the instruction and continued with the battery installation. At approximately 1900 hours, while I was conducting the final sensor calibration, the seismic monitor registered an abrupt cessation of all subsurface activity. The rhythmic vibrations simply stopped. The readout showed a single spike at 1903, and then nothing. Baseline seismic noise only. 3 minutes later, the motion sensor registered an alert on the access road behind my vehicle. I secured the equipment panel and walked to the truck. The spare equipment case that I had placed in the truck bed that morning was now on the ground. The case was open. The contents, backup batteries, calibration tools, spare sensor housings, had been removed and arranged in a line on the dirt beside the case. I had not heard an approach. I had not heard movement. The case had been locked. The truck had been locked. I had a clear line of sight to the access road from where I had been working, and I had observed no vehicle, no person, no animal. I violated protocol. I did not depart immediately. Instead, I gathered the equipment back into the case, secured it in the truck bed, and positioned myself in the cab with the doors locked and the engine running. I kept the headlights on and the radio tuned to the emergency frequency. I remained in this state for approximately 7 hours, watching the sensor station and the surrounding terrain. The sensor station recorded no further anomalies after 2,300 hours. At 0600, with dawn breaking across the canyon, I started the drive back toward the field office. I filed my equipment report as normal. Battery replacement, sensor calibration, firmware verification all completed successfully. I did not mention the motion alerts. I did not mention the subsurface vibrations. I did not mention the equipment case. 2 weeks later, I received notice that the station had been decommissioned for budgetary reasons. The location was reclassified as non-priority. All archived data from the station, including the 72 hours in question, had been transferred to an access restricted repository maintained by a different division. I was reassigned to a station in northern Nevada, 400 miles away. I have not been asked to return to the Utah location. I have not been asked to clarify my report. The incident is closed. Story number 3, patient discharge. I arrived at Havermill State Hospital on a Thursday morning in late October. The drive from Harrisburg took 4 hours through valleys that were losing their color. I brought with me a junior inspector named Reeves and a facilities manager appointed by the court, a thin man named Corrigan, who had been managing the closure logistics since the emergency revocation in January. The building itself was a sprawl of connected structures from 3 different decades. The oldest section dated to 1928. The newest, a 4-story residential wing, had been completed in 1984. Everything was quiet. The parking lot held only our vehicle and a county truck that had been there since the utilities disconnection. My assignment was straightforward. The hospital's operating license had been revoked following an unannounced inspection that found severe documentation failures and medication discrepancies. 11 months had passed. The state wanted final sign-off on the closure before transferring the property to a private developer. I was there to verify that the facility had been properly secured, inventoried, and emptied of all patient materials and controlled substances. Reeves and I began on the ground floor with the administrative offices. Files were still in cabinets. Patient records remained in the basement archive, though they had been flagged for destruction. Corrigan walked behind us with a clipboard, checking boxes on a form that seemed to require very little actual verification. In the medication dispensary, I found bottles dated to the previous week, sertraline, haloperidol, lorazepam. All properly labeled, all untouched in their original packaging, but dated to October 15th. I asked Corrigan who had been accessing the pharmacy. He said no one had. He said the building had been sealed since the state seizure. I documented the discrepancy and moved on. The second floor held patient dormitories. Most rooms were empty, stripped of personal effects. But in 7 rooms, I found belongings still arranged on shelves and in drawers. Photographs, clothing, a ceramic figurine of a horse, a book with a patient name written inside the cover in blue ink. I recognized the handwriting as matching the signature on a discharge summary dated to March. The patient had been transferred to a facility in Erie. Yet her belongings remained untouched on the shelf above her bed. Reeves photographed everything. Corrigan offered no explanation. The basement was where we found the hydrotherapy wing. The hospital had been built in an era when water treatment was considered therapeutic. The wing contained 6 large tiled rooms with metal fixtures and drainage systems. I had seen similar spaces in other closed facilities. They were always dry, always silent. These floors were wet. Not flooded, but visibly wet, as though someone had cleaned them recently with water. And in the central treatment room, I found the source. A faucet was running. The water was cold. The drain was functioning. I turned the valve off and examined the pipes. The county had disconnected all utilities in January. I had seen the work order. The main water line had been cut and capped at the property boundary. I asked Reeves if he had turned the water on. He said he had not. Corrigan was no longer with us. I realized he had remained upstairs. As I was documenting the faucet, Reeves said he heard footsteps. He pointed upward, toward the ceiling. Someone was walking in the corridor above us. The pace was steady, institutional, the kind of pace a staff member uses when moving between rooms on a scheduled round. I radioed the security office at the county facility. They confirmed that no personnel had accessed the building since the seizure. The exterior doors remained sealed with state tamper tape, unbroken. The security logs showed no entries. No one had been inside. The footsteps continued for approximately 2 minutes, then stopped. I decided to proceed to the third floor. The third floor was the residential wing. It contained 47 patient beds arranged in a large open dormitory space. All of them were made. The linens were clean and pressed. The pillows were arranged with military precision. The smell was strong and institutional, a combination of bleach and detergent that suggested recent laundering. I checked the linen inventory records. The sheets on the beds did not match any documented stock. The hospital had been using white cotton with blue piping. These sheets were white with green piping, and they were new. The packaging was still in a storage closet, marked with a delivery date of October 12th. Reeves stopped photographing. He asked if we should leave. I said we should continue. When we returned to the ground floor, Corrigan was in the vehicle with the doors locked. Through the window, I could see that he was in a state of acute distress. His breathing was rapid, his hands were shaking. I opened the door and asked if he was injured. He said he could not go back inside. He said he had been in the building for 37 years, first as a nurse, then as an administrator, and he could not go back inside. He locked the doors again and would not respond to further questions. I completed the inspection alone. The medication logs in the nursing station were dated to the previous week, October 23rd, October 24th, October 25th. The entries were in different handwriting, but all were recorded in the official logbook using the proper format. Medications dispensed. Dosages noted. Patient names listed. All of it accurate, all of it impossible. I documented 17 additional inconsistencies across the facility. Fresh food in the kitchen refrigerator, warm beds, running water in multiple locations, laundry that had been recently processed. The appearance of continuous institutional operation despite legal closure, absence of staff, disconnection of utilities, and absence of any funding mechanism. I submitted my report with a recommendation that closure proceedings be suspended pending investigation into the source of the water, the medications, and the linens. I recommended that the state police conduct a search of the building and that the county coroner be notified in case of undiscovered remains. I received written orders 72 hours later. The orders directed me to finalize the revocation, seal all records, and close the file. There was no investigation. There was no explanation. The orders came from the Deputy Director of the Bureau of Facility Licensure, and they were marked with a classification level I had not seen before. The property was transferred to private sale 4 months later. The building was demolished in the spring of 2020. I was reassigned to nursing home compliance in the Western District. My field notes were collected by a representative from the central office, and I was instructed to destroy any copies I had retained. The file on Havermill State Hospital was closed in June of 2020.